Good afternoon, and welcome to our Ask Me Anything webinar for navigating IEPs and 504 plans. My name is Kelsey, and I am a family support manager at Cure Duchenne and a former special education teacher, and most importantly, a parent of a child with Duchenne. Um, Before we get too far into things, I'm going to pass it over to Rosalia for our Spanish speakers. Don't forget to unmute.
Buenas tardes, bienvenidos a todos. Gracias por estar aquí con nosotros hoy. Cualquiera preguntas que puedan tener en español, por favor, sin ningún problema, yo les puedo ayudar a traducir su pregunta y la respuesta. So, no tengan pena. Igual, hoy tenemos la opción de las capciones. Si ven abajo, en la área donde pueden aprender y apagar su micrófono, también hay la área de capciones. Pueden prender que se prenda traducción a su idioma preferido. Solo es de seleccionar, prender traducción y seleccionar el idioma. Y esperemos que las capciones les ayuden hoy, pero también, si no, estoy aquí. Muchísimas gracias. Adelante, Kelsey.
So I've sat on both sides of the IEP table. I've been the one writing the IEPs, and now I'm the parent sitting in those meetings. And my hope for today is that we make this process feel a little less overwhelming. I'm also excited to share that Doug Levine, one of our Cure Duchenne physical therapists, is joining us today. While I'll be focusing on the educational side of IEPs and 504 plans, Doug is here to help answer questions related to physical therapy in the school setting. He can answer questions about mobility, accessibility, and how PT services can help support your child with Duchenne. All right, so here is our agenda for today. We're going to spend about 20 minutes getting everyone on the same page. So we're going to do a quick overview of IEPs and 504 plans. We're going to talk about common supports for Duchenne, transition planning, tips for working with your school, and then we're going to spend the rest of the time with your questions. And we'll do our best to answer every question today. If we don't know the answer to something, we'll tell you we don't know. We'd rather tell you we don't know than give you inaccurate information. Education laws are federal, but states and even school districts can have different procedures around those laws. So if I don't have the answer for you, I'll point you in the right direction for resources, or I will follow up with a one-on-one after our webinar to get you the most accurate information that we can. If we get to a question that's really in Doug's wheelhouse, I may ask him to jump in and kind of take over from there. The great part about working with Cure Duchenne is that we are a team, and we want to make sure you have the most accurate information possible. So let's go ahead and get started. We're first going to look at the differences between IEPs and 504s. All right, so for a 504, you're looking at accommodations that are provided under Section 504. They focus on equal access without changes to the curriculum. They're less formal. It's typically just a list of accommodations. The process for getting one and for upkeeping one is less structured, and there are fewer procedural protections. So when you think of an IEP, or excuse me, when you think of a 504, think of it as leveling the playing field. For an IEP, it provides specialized instruction under IDEA. It includes specialized teaching, can include therapies, accommodations, modifications to the curriculum. It's a formal, detailed plan. It has goals, objectives, progress monitoring, and required services. And it has strong legal protections like consent, prior written notice, and dispute options. So when you think of an IEP, you're thinking of it as changing how a student is taught. So it's not just giving you accommodations, it's also changing how your child is taught. Neither plan is better than the other. It really just depends on the needs of your child. This is probably one of the most misconception questions I hear is or asked, does a Duchenne diagnosis automatically qualify my child for an IEP or a 504? And the short answer is no. A diagnosis by itself doesn't determine eligibility. The diagnosis starts a conversation. The student's educational needs determine the plan, and then schools aren't asking, does he have Duchenne? They're asking, what educational support does the child need because of Duchenne? So they're really looking at how the diagnosis affects the student's education. All right, we're going to look specifically at how you would qualify for a 504. So for a 504 plan, a student must have a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life events or life activities, sorry, not events, life activities. And those can include things like walking, standing, climbing stairs, riding, even breathing, learning, caring for oneself. It's a pretty broad umbrella. Um, Substantially limiting doesn't mean being unable. It could mean walking slower. It could mean fatiguing faster. It could mean you have difficulty riding, difficulties climbing stairs. Those can substantially limit major life activities. And many children with Duchenne qualify very early for a 504 because endurance and mobility are already being affected. All right, to qualify for an IEP, a student must meet both criteria. So there's two things. They must qualify under one of the disability categories recognized by IDEA. Many of our children qualify under other health impaired or OHI. And they also must need specialized instruction because the disability adversely affects educational performance. So educational performance is much broader than just grades. It includes academics, but it also includes communication skills, functional skills, behavior, participation, independence, organization, access to instruction. So grades never determine eligibility. The question is, does the student need accommodations or do they need specially designed instruction? All right, our next slide is looking at some examples of when you might need a 504 or when you would need an IEP. So an example of a kid who with a 504, it's a student who earns A's and B's but tires easily. He needs elevator access, extra transition time. He might need adaptive PE, wheelchair for long distances, and rest breaks. So those accommodations are providing equal access. So the way I think about it is most children don't tire very quickly in the hallway. So how can we make sure your child doesn't tire very quickly in the hallway? So we're going to provide them with a wheelchair, and now when they arrive to class, they're not fatigued, just like all their other friends. We have leveled the playing field by providing them a wheelchair. An example of someone who might need an IEP is a student is missing instruction needs because of fatigue. He needs direct instruction and written expression. He needs scaffolding instruction into manageable pieces, so breaking large things into smaller parts for them. Instruction in using assistive technology, and maybe they need occupational therapy or even physical therapy. So for a 504, you're thinking accommodations. With an IEP, you're thinking accommodations plus the specially designed instruction. So with an IEP, you get both the accommodations plus specially designed instruction. All right. Next, we're looking at how Duchenne changes over time. So we know as Duchenne changes over time, school support should change too. We know that I know for a fact my son Soren, when he started kindergarten, his needs look much different today now that he's starting third grade than they did in kindergarten. So as those needs change, the plan needs to change too. So review plans regularly, anticipate future needs instead of waiting for changes, and proactive planning helps students stay included and successful. So, for example, if you know your child is going to be starting to use a wheelchair, go ahead and let the school know that's coming so they can prepare. One of the big things we didn't think about was door frames, even so, like the thresholds of doors. If you're ahead of that by the time the kid gets his wheelchair, then those thresholds have already been fixed, and then he's able to just glide through school. So, proactive planning always helps schools stay ahead of it. All right, next we're going to look at some common accommodations. All right, so this isn't a checklist, it's more like a menu. So every child won't need every support, and some may need supports that are not listed. These are just some of the ones we see most commonly. So, kind of already talked about extra transition time and elevator access, adaptive PE, rest breaks, wheelchair accessibility, technology for riding, emergency health plans, flexible attendance, assistance carrying materials. And these are some supports we see most often, but every student's plan, it should be individualized. And when you're thinking of your child, think about from the time you drop them off in the morning to the time you pick them up in the afternoon, and kind of think about their day that way, and think about where the supports or accommodations need to be. All right. Keep your plan up to date. So if you have a 504 or an IEP, you want to make sure those are staying up to date. For a 504, you need to make sure those are reviewed periodically. Many districts review annually, but federal law does not require them to have an annual review. So you want to make sure you're reaching out and getting those annual reviews done, because Duchenne can change very quickly, and it definitely changes from year to year. So you want to make sure you're meeting, updating those accommodations as needs change. And as always, parents can request a meeting at any time. So even if you've already had one meeting this school year, if you don't feel like your accommodations are meeting your students' needs, you can reach back out and meet as many times as you need to. With an IEP, goals, services, and accommodations in placement are reviewed annually. Um, they can be reviewed sooner if you request those. A reevaluation happens every 3 years. This determines eligibility and educational needs, and again, that can happen sooner if requested. The bottom line is, though, you don't have to wait for your annual review if your needs change. So reach out frequent and often. Anything isn't too small. If you have concerns, reach out, have a meeting. All right, transition planning. So it isn't just about graduation, it's about preparing for the future. It's a gradual process, not a one-time meeting. It should be an ongoing conversation with your student and the school to help plan for the future. So the transition planning begins no later than age required by your state. So some states start at 16 while others begin earlier. I know I'm in North Carolina and we start at age 14. Schools begin planning for after high school based on your child's strengths, interests, and goals. So transition planning may include education and training, employment, independent living, self-advocacy, and self-determination, transportation, and community needs. And then also for our boys with Duchenne, it may also include planning for changing in mobility, assistive technology, college or vocational supports, the transition to adult health care, and then community resources and disability services. One of the biggest things I can tell you is not to wait until high school. You don't wake up at 17 and magically know how to advocate for yourself. Kids learn by practice, so start them out early. Let them answer questions in meetings or doctor's appointments where you're there to answer or step in if they falter. Teach them how to explain their diagnosis to their friends or their teachers or people in your community. Let them tell teachers when they need a break. those little things become huge later. So begin encouraging self-advocacy early by helping your child help them understand their diagnosis in an age-appropriate way. That's huge. Practice asking for accommodations. My son Soren, he has the accommodation that someone carries his lunch tray, and inevitably he'll have a sub, and the sub won't look closely at the sub plans and will forget to come grab his tray from him. And he will try, even though he knows he's not supposed to, he will try to carry that tray and it will end up in the floor every time. And that's one of those skills that we're having to work with him on is, you need to advocate for yourself and tell somebody that you need this accommodation of someone carrying the tray for you. Have them participate in their IEP or 504 meetings as they get older. They're the ones learning, they're the ones in the school environment, and they have a really great opinion about how they should, those accommodations and those supports should work. And then begin thinking about future goals and interests. Just don't wait till high school. Start those conversations early. All right, so the best plans happen when everyone works together. So this is kind of like the power triangle here. You're at the top, you're the parent, you know your kid best. Below you are your medical providers and your school education team. Um, no one person has all the answers. Like you're the expert of your child, but the school knows the education and your doctors know Duchenne. So together, you guys make this amazing team. So schools are not the enemy. Most educators really want to help. Nobody has all the answers. That's why it's called an IEP team meeting, and you are part of the team. And you can include anyone you want to in your team. If you go to a clinic who has a really great social worker, you can always invite them to your IEP meeting. You just have to let the school know who you're inviting, and then you can invite anybody you want to. So you can invite, my son is in counseling, so we always invite his therapist to come to those meetings. Anyone who knows your child and can help develop a plan for their education is a key member of the team, and everyone has a place at the table. Next, we're going to talk about some tips for IEP meetings. So you want to make sure you're coming prepared. For me, coming prepared means I'm asking for a copy of the IEP prior to the meeting, so I have time to review it. I will just reach out to the case manager once they have scheduled an IEP and say, hey, I'd really like to have a draft copy of the IEP prior to the meeting, so then I can come prepared with questions. I have things I need clarification for, and I'm ready to roll and I have my questions and I feel confident in what I'm doing. So one of the biggest tips I have for you is to ask for the copy of the IEP prior to the meeting. You can do that with the IEP. You can do that with any evaluation reports. You can get those ahead of time so you have a chance to kind of look through them and prepare yourself. You want to make sure you don't feel pressured to sign immediately. So if you still have questions, you've had the meeting and you still have questions and you're not sure about something and you need time to sit with it, you absolutely can. You do not have to sign that day. You can always follow up with an email in writing, and then it's okay to also, if you don't feel like you guys are on the same page, to request another meeting to kind of take a break and come back and reconvene. One of the tips I have for that I use with my family is at his annual review meeting, I always ask them to write in the prior written notice for the next school year that I want over the summer his new teacher to meet his old teacher with me there, kind of like a passing of the torch. So those teachers who have spent a whole year have so much information about your child that needs to be passed on to the next teacher. And so I make sure we meet before school starts, kind of like a passing of the torch, passing of the guard, if you will, to make sure everybody feels good about starting a new school year. All right, next I have some questions that we hear most. So these are just some of the questions I thought we could go over before I opened the floor up to you guys. These are kind of the common ones that I've seen. So the first one, does my child qualify? We've kind of already talked about it. The diagnosis of Duchenne starts the conversation. It doesn't automatically qualify your student for an IEP or a 504 plan. Schools have to look at how Duchenne affects your child's ability to access and participate in school. So the answer is it starts the conversation. Um, you have a diagnosis immediately. I would immediately, if I, this is what I did whenever we were diagnosed. I immediately reached out to the school system. He was getting ready to start kindergarten, and I went ahead and reached out and said, "Hey, we just got this diagnosis. I'd love for you guys to evaluate him to see where he would fall, either a 504 or an IEP." Next one, what accommodations should I ask for? And this really isn't a one size fit all because every child with Duchenne is different. I encourage families to think about their child's entire school day. So from the time, if they're on the bus, the time they step on the bus to the time they get off the bus. Or if they're in car line, the time you drop them off in car line to the time you pick them up in car line. Where are they using extra energy? Where are they struggling? And that's where the accommodations come in. Next one, can my child have both an IEP and a 504? This is a great question and one that causes a lot of confusion. Generally, if a student has an IEP, the accommodations they need are written directly into the IEP. So then a 504 would be obsolete because the IEP is now covering the accommodations. Um, they don't usually have uh, separate plans because that gets confusing. For like if you're when you're testing and stuff, where to pull the testing accommodations. But an IEP can include the accommodations, but a 504 plan cannot include goals and objectives. So that's kind of where they're different. This is a big one. What if the school says no? This happens a lot. We really have a great idea and we think the school system's going to love this, and then they turn us down. So first, don't panic. A no isn't necessarily the end of the conversation. Ask the team to explain why they made that decision and ask for the data they used um, to support that decision. If you disagree, you can always ask for additional information that would help them reconsider. You can provide outside medical evaluations or documentations. You could also request additional evaluations be complete for by them for your child. And if you're still concerned and you're not happy with that answer, there are procedural safeguards in place that can help you with disputes and help you come to a resolution on that. Most schools want to do the right thing. They may just not have the information they need about Duchenne or what your child specifically needs. How do I prepare for transition to middle to high school? We kind of already talked about this one too. You don't want to start when they're 17. So start early. For transitioning to a new school in the summer, I would reach out to the principal and have a way to tour the school, get a lay of the land, kind of think about how especially from like elementary to middle, how you're going to be changing classes more. You want to think about the long hallways, lockers, PE expectations. And the big one is emergency procedures. So you want to have all those in place before your child even hits the door. So I would and a lot of schools proactively have a plan in place for that. Like I know in our county, our fifth grade class comes and tours our middle schools. But for kids with Duchenne, that probably needs to be more than that. They probably need to come in even with your physical therapist to kind of get a lay of the land, see what problems there may be, and just prepare the building and your student for the school year. All right. That is all I have for you guys for now. I'm going to open it up to you guys if you have any questions.
Elsie, can I add something?
Of course. I wish you would.
Um, I think so. For those of you that are not familiar with me, so I work with Cure Duchenne as a physical therapist, but I've also worked in the school district for a long time now, 28 years as a PT in the school. Kelsey, I think you did a beautiful job of explaining and clarifying all this because it can be confusing what the differences are and what the different things cover. Um, One thing that I just wanted to mention, um, because you were talking about like modifications or um, direct services through an IEP and what those look like and what's needed. Duchenne, we all know is progressive. And so even if like from my perspective, when I'm in the schools, even if the child is young and they're just starting out, they're 5 years old or 6 years old, and maybe there are not gross motor issues. Like maybe they're getting around okay and they're keeping up with everybody okay and they're not falling or they're not having difficulties. Sometimes, many times, almost all the times, I will still recommend services on maybe a consult basis, on a minimal basis, because a lot of, and I think this is important for parents to understand, in the schools, a lot of what we're doing is education and consultation. And sometimes with Duchenne, it does require direct services, but a lot of times it's educating the teachers, it's educating the paraprofessionals that are in the classroom, it's educating the PE coach, but that could also be anybody that's coming in contact with a child. It could be the lunchroom staff. It could be the librarian. So really making sure that your child, that the student is safe and that the academic staff is not maybe doing something that's contraindicated to what they should be doing. So even if there are not these obvious gross motor concerns, physical therapy can still be recommended in the school for that consultation, for that educational purpose, to make sure that they are staying independent, to make sure that they are staying safe.
That's a good point. I would also add that if your child starts off on a 504 plan, that doesn't mean they're locked in for the rest of their lives in a 504 plan. If their needs change, you can absolutely later on qualify for an IEP. It really depends on your child's needs and their educational needs and supports that they may need later down the road. And the other way too, like with my son, he's on a IEP right now, but he has goals and services related to reading and math, and those he's called up a lot, and they're looking at exiting him from that, and he would move to just a 504 plan with what Doug's talking about, just some PT support.
And and I think it's sorry, I'm just gonna if there are no questions, I'm just
Yeah.
gonna add stuff as it comes up.
Yeah.
In about a third of the cases with Duchenne or with Becker, there are cognitive issues, there are behavioral issues, there are sensory issues. And so physical therapy and more than that, occupational therapy, which both are related services in the school, deal with those types of things. So even if maybe you request an evaluation for PT or OT and they say, oh, they're getting around fine, they're getting from class to class okay, make sure that those therapists are addressing any cognitive or emotional or behavioral needs that may be present.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's a good point. Just even if they don't necessarily need it right now, you can I just requested them to be on consultatively. So just to check in with my son once a quarter. Check in with the teacher to make sure that she's not seeing anything concerning. Having those just as backups is a great idea.
De nuevo les quería recordar que si alguien tiene una pregunta en español, están bienvenidas sus preguntas y les podemos asistir.
See, so you did such a good job of explaining everything. There's no questions.
That's what I'm going to tell myself.
Yeah. But certainly, if I mean, if there are no questions today, if things do come up, I mean, Kelsey is a tremendous resource, and is always happy to answer questions as myself, Rosalia. So if things come up at a later date, or if you don't feel comfortable asking here, you can always reach out to us. I think we put up on the screen that you can schedule a one-to-one. Cure Duchenne has this one-to-one program that we have. There's never a cost for that. And you can schedule a one-to-one video call or audio call, whatever you're comfortable with Kelsey to go over your child's specific situation, or with myself, or Jennifer is my colleague, the other physical therapist, and her email is jennifer@cureduchenne.org. You can schedule a one-to-one meeting with any of us and go over your child's situation. Never a cost to those, and there's not a limit. Like you get one a year, and you've asked your question, and then you have to wait a year. We're really we want to we're here to support you, and we're here to um, answer your questions and make sure that you're comfortable with any situations that come up, and if you need guidance with those situations. So please reach out if ever needed.
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite parts to do is work one-on-one with families, especially regarding IEPs and 504s.
Para compartir un poco sobre lo que acaba de comentar Doug y Kelsey, es que tenemos disponible para todos, sin límite y sin costo, juntas por videollamada. Nos pueden contactar, podemos programar una llamada con ustedes y hablar sobre las preguntas, preocupaciones, y los podemos guiar en no solamente en el aspecto de la escuela, pero también si tienen cualquier otra pregunta relacionada a Duchenne y cómo podemos apoyarlos. Estamos a su servicio y estamos disponibles para apoyarlos. Muchas gracias por estar aquí hoy, y cualquier pregunta, si no hoy, en el futuro, la pueden compartir con nosotros.
All right, if there are no questions, we're going to wrap up this Ask Me Anything. Again, please feel free to reach out to us at any time if you have questions. Thank you so much for joining us today. This was my very first webinar, so I feel very great that you all were here to witness it. But thank you so much for joining us today.